Green Acres, 1965 to 1971, remains one of the most beloved classic sitcoms, blending quirky humor, small-town charm, and unforgettable characters. From Oliver and Lisa Douglas to the eccentric residents of Hooterville, the series carved its place in television history. But it's been over 5 decades since the show ended, so what happened to the cast of Green Acres? Where did life take them after the cameras stopped rolling? And who is still with us today in 2025? Join us as we take a nostalgic trip back to Hooterville and uncover the fascinating journeys, careers, and legacies of the stars who made Green Acres an enduring favorite. Eddie Albert was born on April 22, 1906, and took on the role of Oliver Wendell Douglas in 1965 at age 59, embodying the stiff Manhattan attorney who abandoned skyscrapers for dirt and chaos in Hooterville. The character's stubborn idealism and almost tragic inability to fit in struck audiences as comedic gold. But Albert himself was far more complex and darker than his clean television image. His childhood in Illinois was marked by abandonment and poverty. His father left, forcing his mother into grueling work, and Eddie grew up concealing shame about never belonging among wealthier peers. The boy who masked insecurity became the man who overcompensated with a rigid, domineering personality. His career, often painted as smooth, nearly collapsed when his left-leaning views and anti-war activism brought him under FBI surveillance during the Red Scare. Rumors even swirled that he might be blacklisted. Though he escaped that fate, producers never forgot, and tensions followed him onto sets. On Green Acres, he clashed with producers over script control, often demanding rewrites, and crew members whispered about his manipulative streak, with some accusing him of sabotaging co-stars who threatened to outshine him. His marriage to Mexican actress Margot was publicly celebrated, but privately volatile, riddled with separations, whispered affairs during his wartime service, and her lifelong struggles with mental health. Their son, Edward Jr., later struggled with addiction, adding bitterness to an already fractured family dynamic. Albert's health held remarkably long, but behind his longevity was grief. He watched friends and peers die, outliving his wife by 2 decades. On May 26, 2005, he died of pneumonia in Los Angeles at 99. But even in death, his estate of roughly $10 million, built from films, real estate, and careful investments, could not erase whispered secrets of his paranoia, his behind-the-scenes feuds, and the private torment of a man whose patriotism and heroism on paper masked scars that haunted him until the end. Eva Gabor was born on February 11, 1919, and stepped into the sparkling shoes of Lisa Douglas in 1965 at age 46, playing the glamorous Hungarian socialite trapped in the mud of rural America. Lisa's ditzy, cooter-loving absurdity became a comedic centerpiece of Green Acres, her accent alone enough to make audiences adore her. Yet Eva herself hid shadows behind the glitter. Born into a family that fled Hungary's instability, she grew up privileged but precarious, surrounded by whispers that the Gabor family's survival relied on opportunistic relationships with aristocrats and businessmen, an origin Eva later glossed over. Arriving in Hollywood, she fought bitterly against the reputation of being just another exotic beauty, constantly overshadowed by her scandalous sister, Zsa Zsa. Eva masked her insecurities with extravagance, jewelry, furs, and wild nights in Las Vegas, where she was rumored to lose fortunes at baccarat, debts later erased by quiet financial bailouts from wealthy admirers. Her 5 marriages collapsed in rapid succession. One husband accused her of calculated infidelity, another of manipulation, while gossip columns buzzed about violent shouting matches that ended with police interventions. Her longest, strangest entanglement was with mogul Merv Griffin. Though she insisted it was platonic, insiders suspected the arrangement was transactional, giving her financial security while covering his homosexuality from prying tabloids. Despite this, Ava was lonely, childless, and often confessed to friends that beneath the gowns she feared irrelevance. Scandal trailed her business dealings as well. Her wig and beauty empire was hugely profitable, but dogged by accusations that products were cheaply made and exploited overseas labor. When she died on July 4, 1995 in Los Angeles, at 76 from respiratory failure after a bathtub fall in Mexico, she left behind a fortune estimated at $30 million, a mixture of business profits, real estate, and jewelry. Yet even this glittering empire could not erase the tragic irony. The woman who played a caricature of wealth and glamour died isolated, remembered as a star whose dazzling charm always concealed heartbreak and a restless hunger for validation. Alvy Moore, born December 5, 1921, in Vincennes, Indiana, was 43 when he began portraying the perpetually baffled county agent Hank Kimball on Green Acres, a role that turned confusion into high art and gave audiences a figure both maddening and lovable. Kimball's endless contradictions and scatterbrained speeches were a comedic highlight, but for Moore, the role became a double-edged sword. His childhood was marked by relentless instability. Raised in poverty, bullied for his small stature, he endured a boyhood spent hiding vulnerability behind humor. Serving as a Marine during World War II left him scarred both physically and emotionally, and though he rarely spoke of combat, colleagues whispered about bouts of depression and anger that erupted during rehearsals. Professionally, he faced setback after setback. He was rejected repeatedly from dramatic film auditions, and when he finally landed a chance in the early 1970s to pivot away from comedy, critics shredded his performance as painfully inept, leaving him humiliated and typecast forever. Behind the scenes, Moore's career was hindered by his own unpredictability. He sometimes arrived late to shoots, his drinking noticeable, and he once stormed off the Green Acres set during a dispute over script changes, nearly losing his contract. His personal life was far from the gentle image he projected. His marriage was strained by whispered infidelity, and his daughter reportedly kept her distance, resenting his absence during her upbringing. A co-founder of a small production company, he invested unwisely in independent films that lost money, further fueling his frustration. Friends described him as kind but chronically insecure, a man desperate for recognition yet sabotaged by his own volatility. As his health declined in the 1990s, he grew more reclusive, haunted by what he saw as a wasted career. Moore died on May 4, 1997, in Palm Desert, California, at 75 from heart failure, leaving behind a net worth of under $1 million, primarily in modest real estate and minor royalties. Tom Lester was born on September 23, 1938, and entered Green Acres in 1965 at age 27, portraying Eb Dawson, the goofy, loyal farmhand whose comic timing and wide-eyed innocence made him a fan favorite. Eb's childlike devotion and endless naivety became both a punchline and a comfort in the series, but Lester's real life was neither so lighthearted nor so simple. Raised in rural Mississippi, his childhood was steeped in poverty, and he grew up in a deeply religious household where emotional expression was often stifled, leaving him to hide insecurities behind humor. He arrived in Hollywood with little more than faith and farm skills, famously winning the role because he could actually milk a cow, but his career quickly soured after Green Acres. Typecast as the Bumpkin, he was rejected from serious roles and mocked by industry insiders as a one-trick performer. Behind his wholesome image lay rumors of stubborn self-righteousness. Cast members whispered he could be sanctimonious, berating colleagues about morality and refusing roles he deemed sinful, alienating producers who saw him as impossible to work with. His greatest failure came when he attempted a comeback in the late 1970s, starring in a touring Christian production that collapsed amid financial mismanagement and accusations he pocketed church donations. Personally, he lived in near isolation, preaching at small churches and avoiding Hollywood. But his relationships were troubled. He never married until late in life, and family members described him as controlling, with religious zeal that pushed loved ones away. His health declined in his later years, battling Parkinson's disease, which robbed him of mobility and dignity, while friends lamented that his faith community did not shield him from loneliness. On April 20, 2020, he died in Nashville at 81, complications from Parkinson's finally ending his long decline. His estate, estimated at only $500,000, consisted mostly of farmland and modest savings, a stark contrast to the millions earned by his co-stars. Frank Cady, born September 8, 1915 in Susanville, California, was 50 when he assumed the role of Sam Drucker in 1965, the mild-mannered storekeeper who appeared not only in Green Acres, but also in Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies, creating a rare trifecta of sitcom consistency. On screen, Drucker was the calm anchor of chaos, but Cady's own journey was far less serene. His early years were scarred by the Great Depression, when his family's livelihood collapsed, and he endured taunts from classmates over his ragged clothes, experiences that hardened him and made him wary of trust. Though he became a respected actor, he never escaped typecasting, and beneath his quiet demeanor lay simmering anger at being perpetually relegated to supporting roles. His greatest professional humiliation came in the late 1960s, when he attempted to break into feature films but was quietly pushed out after being labeled too television, a rejection that left him embittered for decades. Off-camera, he was known among colleagues as reserved to the point of coldness, and while his marriage lasted, gossip suggested he was emotionally distant and domineering, traits that strained friendships and left him isolated in later years. Though he avoided public scandal, insiders whispered about his sharp tongue during contract negotiations, where he fought fiercely for fair pay after years of being undercut by networks, actions that earned him a reputation as difficult. His quiet retirement in Oregon masked a man still brooding over slights, particularly the studios that blacklisted him briefly in the 1970s after he spoke out about the exploitation of TV actors. Health problems in his later life only deepened his reclusiveness. Frank Cady died on June 8, 2012, in Wilsonville, Oregon, at 96, one of the last surviving members of the Green Acres cast. His estate, worth around $1.5 million, consisted largely of property investments and accumulated royalties, but friends suggested the wealth brought him little joy, as he remained haunted by a career he felt never gave him the recognition he deserved. Mary Grace Canfield, born September 3, 1924, in Rochester, New York, was 41 when she first embodied Ralph Monroe in 1965, the awkward but endearing female carpenter whose cheery howdy doody greeting and bumbling handiwork made her an instant fan favorite. On screen, Ralph was quirky and unforgettable, a rare female character who dared to break gender norms even as her comedic incompetence kept her in the role of lovable fool. Yet Canfield's life was anything but comedic. Born into a working-class family, she endured a childhood of harsh criticism, constantly teased for her unconventional appearance and lanky frame, which left her feeling like an outsider. Acting became her shield, but her early career was filled with rejection, especially from Broadway producers who branded her unattractive and unsuitable for leads. Despite her stage training, she was frequently sidelined into oddball roles, and her attempt to push for parity in pay during the 1950s earned her a reputation for being difficult. Whispers circulated that she would deliberately overshadow younger actresses during auditions, holding back friendships in favor of competition. Her personal life was equally troubled. A brief marriage ended in divorce after her husband left her for a younger woman, a humiliation that tabloids eagerly exploited. Rumors swirled of her heavy drinking in the aftermath, with colleagues claiming she would sometimes arrive on set hungover, though she masked it well with her professional charm. Her biggest heartbreak came in the late 1970s, when she was considered for a leading role in a network sitcom, but was ultimately rejected for being too odd-looking, a rejection that permanently derailed her trajectory toward stardom. She retreated into guest spots and minor television roles, her bitterness about Hollywood's double standards never fully hidden. In her private journals, later discovered after her death, she wrote of feeling invisible, overshadowed, and typecast as the quirk who could never be taken seriously. She died on February 15, 2014, at 89, from lung cancer in Santa Barbara, California. Her estate, worth under $1 million, consisted of a modest house and small savings, a testament to decades of steady but underappreciated work. Pat Buttram, born June 19, 1915, in Addison, Alabama, stepped into television history in 1965 at age 50, when he became the notorious Mr. Haney, the crooked salesman of Green Acres, whose broken promises and absurd deals fascinated viewers. On screen, Haney embodied rural corruption dressed up as charm, a trickster whose greed was transparent but irresistible, and audiences loved to hate him. Yet Buttram's own life carried echoes of that duplicity. He was raised in a devout but impoverished family, the son of a struggling Methodist minister who could not shield him from relentless ridicule over his nasal voice and thin frame, leading the young Buttram to mask humiliation with humor. His career was a patchwork of frustrations. Though he worked steadily in westerns alongside Gene Autry, producers often mocked him as too odd-looking for leading roles. And there were whispers that his career survived less by talent and more by his willingness to manipulate connections. Scandal clung to him in subtler forms, stories of heated clashes with directors, of stormy late-night drinking that left crews waiting, and of debts from reckless gambling. His biggest career humiliation came in the 1950s, when a failed attempt at hosting his own TV variety show collapsed after only a few weeks, a failure he never publicly acknowledged but privately cursed. Personally, his marriages revealed instability. His first ended bitterly, and though he later married actress Sheila Ryan, insiders claimed the relationship was marred by his drinking and volatile temper. Rumors of infidelity and emotional cruelty followed him, staining his reputation among peers. Friends confided he carried a streak of bitterness toward Hollywood elites who sidelined him, even as he smiled through interviews. His later years were marred by ill health, kidney problems consuming his strength. He died on January 8, 1994, in Los Angeles at 78 from kidney failure, leaving an estate valued at about $2 million, though much of it was tied up in property disputes with extended family. Sid Melton, born May 22, 1917, in Brooklyn, New York, was 48 when he stepped into the role of Alf Monroe, Ralph's jittery brother, in 1965. Alf's nervous energy and bumbling charm gave Green Acres an eccentric spark, perfectly countering Ralph's deadpan awkwardness, and audiences came to love his frantic delivery. But Melton's off-screen life was riddled with turbulence and shadows. Growing up in Depression-era Brooklyn as the son of a push-cart peddler, he faced mockery for his short stature and nasal voice, traits that haunted him throughout his career. Though he worked steadily as a character actor, he was plagued by typecasting, forever trapped in comic relief roles while yearning for dramatic recognition. His personal demons were more destructive. A crippling gambling addiction led him deep into debt, forcing him into seedy nightclub gigs linked to mobsters in Las Vegas, where whispers circulated that he had to perform comedy routines to pay off poker losses. He was notorious among colleagues for his fragile ego and explosive temper. Stories abound of him storming off set after minor pranks or refusing to rehearse with actors he considered scene stealers. His brief marriage collapsed amid allegations of infidelity and violent arguments, and he grew estranged from his only child, who publicly criticized him for being absent and obsessed with chasing roles to cover his debts. His most crushing failure came in the 1960s, when NBC built a sitcom pilot around him. The show flopped so spectacularly after a single episode that it became a running joke in the industry, branding him unbankable for the rest of his career. While he continued to work steadily, the humiliation left scars he never escaped. Later in life, he clung desperately to small guest spots and conventions, masking his bitterness with jokes, but privately admitting he felt forgotten. Sid Melton died on November 2, 2011, in Los Angeles at age 94 from pneumonia, his once lively career reduced to a nostalgic footnote. His estate, around $1 million, came mostly from modest savings and residuals, but insiders whispered that much had been swallowed by debts and years of reckless habits. K.E. Cooter was born April 25, 1925, and in 1965, at 40 years old, he became the bearded and soft-spoken Newt Kiley, the ever-helpful farmer of Hooterville, whose quiet wisdom and oddball demeanor gave Green Acres its eccentric heart. While viewers saw a gentleman who embodied rural kindness, Cooter's real story was far more complex. Born into a Hollywood family, his father Leo was a respected art director, his mother a silent film actress. He grew up under suffocating pressure to succeed, constantly compared to industry titans. Though his upbringing offered privilege, it also carried dysfunction. His father was exacting, his mother emotionally distant, and Kay often retreated into eccentricity to shield himself from ridicule. He studied theater, but was dismissed early in his career as too unusual-looking for leading roles. His booming voice, both his calling card and curse, pigeonholing him into odd character parts. He spent years fighting for work, humiliated by casting directors who laughed at his peculiar delivery, and endured whispered accusations of lobbying behind the backs of fellow actors to secure roles. A quiet scandal emerged in the 1970s when he was accused of breaking a professional contract, an incident that nearly cost him his reputation and revealed his reputation for being unyielding and difficult. Personally, Cooter avoided traditional family life, remaining single and childless, fueling speculation about failed romances and secret affairs with both men and women. Whispers that could have ruined him in the era's unforgiving climate. His isolation deepened with time, and he was known to spend weeks without social contact, finding solace in animation voice work and stacks of Hollywood memorabilia that filled his home. He struggled with depression and reliance on prescription medications to maintain a functional rhythm. Despite his constant work, he never achieved stardom, and his income reflected steady but unspectacular employment. He died on November 12, 2003, at 78, in Burbank, California, from pulmonary complications, leaving behind an estate of around $500,000. It was the modest fortune of a man who spent decades working relentlessly, yet never fully escaping the shadows of an industry that both sustained and sidelined him. Robert Folk was born May 5, 1908, and in 1965, at 57, he took on the role of Roy Trendell, the tough but fair-minded president of the Hooterville Phone Company, a no-nonsense figure who embodied small-town authority with flashes of hidden warmth. His character gave audiences a sense of order in the chaos of Green Acres, but the man himself led a life marked by insecurity and quiet struggles. Raised in Philadelphia in a family of limited means, he grew up mocked for his awkward build and shy nature, often withdrawing into books and sketching architecture as an escape from ridicule. He trained as an architect before turning to acting, but the transition was fraught with disappointment. Studios routinely overlooked him for starring roles, and he became trapped in an endless cycle of typecasting as sheriffs, judges, and stern authority figures. Though praised for professionalism, he was known to clash with directors over his habit of rewriting lines or arguing for expanded roles, sparking tensions on set that colleagues rarely discussed publicly. At least one production quietly replaced him after a dispute escalated into shouting matches, a humiliating episode he carried silently. His marriage to actress Barbara Slater lasted, but insiders whispered of icy periods of estrangement and long silences that suggested fractures beneath the image of stability. Personally, he battled insomnia and bouts of depression, sometimes retreating to architectural projects as a form of therapy to maintain his balance. Unlike some peers, he avoided alcohol or gambling excess, but his temper and emotional volatility alienated collaborators. He lived through the deaths of close friends and colleagues, leaving him increasingly bitter about the industry's indifference to character actors. He died on February 25, 1989, at 80, in Los Angeles, leaving an estate under $1 million, built largely on property holdings and decades of steady but secondary work. Though outwardly stable and scandal-free compared to others, his legacy reflects the unglamorous reality of Hollywood. Long careers marked by typecasting, quiet personal battles, and a modest fortune that symbolized a lifetime of being indispensable, yet never celebrated. Eleanor Audley was born on November 19, 1905, and in 1965, at age 60, she took on the role of Mother Eunice Douglas, the sharp-tongued, aristocratic matriarch whose constant disdain for rural life and cutting remarks toward her son Oliver defined some of the most biting humor of Green Acres. Her character exuded icy superiority, embodying a social order that clashed with the absurdity of farm life, and audiences both loved and loathed her commanding presence. Her childhood, however, was far from aristocratic. Audley grew up in Newark under the shadow of her father's financial collapse, a humiliation that cast a lifelong bitterness over her relationships. Ridiculed in school for her husky voice and severe demeanor, she learned early to mask insecurities with wit and sarcasm. Professionally, her distinctive voice gave her immortality as Disney's Maleficent and Lady Tremaine, yet it also typecast her into sinister, cold-hearted roles that made her resentful. She endured rejection after rejection for leading lady parts, and on Broadway, her habit of cutting down fellow performers earned her a reputation as impossible. Her greatest humiliation came when MGM abruptly replaced her in a high-profile project, citing her lack of glamour, a wound she carried silently. Personally, Audley lived with guarded secrecy. She never married, fueling speculation about hidden romances with women in the entertainment industry. Rumors she feared could ruin her career if exposed in an intolerant era. Her private life was marked by solitude, punctuated by chronic illnesses she rarely disclosed, and colleagues noted her frequent bouts of exhaustion and depression. In her later years, she withdrew from the industry, retreating into a modest home in Los Angeles. She died on November 25, 1991, from respiratory failure at age 86. Her estate, valued at under $1 million, reflected a lifetime of supporting roles rather than stardom, yet her chilling performances and unforgettable voice left a legacy that far outlived the modest fortune she left behind. Edgar Buchanan was born on March 20, 1903, and in 1965, at age 62, he began playing Uncle Joe Carson, the scheming but oddly endearing proprietor of the Shady Rest Hotel, who shuffled between Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, and the Beverly Hillbillies. On screen, Uncle Joe was a lazy but crafty dreamer, constantly cooking up harebrained get-rich-quick schemes. But audiences loved his mix of mischief and warmth. Off-screen, however, Buchanan's life carried a darker edge. His childhood in rural Missouri was steeped in poverty, his family's unstable finances pushing him to develop a blunt, defensive humor to mask humiliation. He abandoned dentistry, a career his parents forced on him, to pursue acting, earning ridicule as the dentist who drilled into Hollywood and failed, a jab that haunted his early years. Although he found steady work, Buchanan was rumored to be volatile with producers and was whispered to indulge in alcohol during long shoots, often arriving to set in a fog. His biggest career disaster nearly ended everything when his name surfaced in the Hollywood Red Scare investigations, with studio heads quietly considering him for blacklisting. Though never formally charged, the damage to his reputation closed doors for years. Personally, Buchanan's marriage faced heavy strain. His long absences and rumored affairs created fissures, and his son's eventual estrangement left him deeply wounded. He clung to his work, hiding pain behind the gruff humor that defined his characters. In his later years, he suffered from heart problems, and on April 4, 1979, he died in Palm Desert, California, from a stroke complicated by pneumonia at age 76. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at around $2 million, primarily from television earnings and real estate holdings, yet bitter family disputes over his wealth marred his legacy, leaving a cloud over the fortune of the man who once embodied small-town charm on America's screens. Barbara Pepper was born May 31, 1915, and in 1965, at the age of 50, she embodied Doris Ziffel on Green Acres, the sharp-tongued, pragmatic farm wife who became the adoptive mother of Arnold the Pig and a beloved symbol of rural comedy. Audiences adored Doris's grounded wit, but the woman behind the role lived a life of striking contrasts, one defined by glittering Hollywood beginnings and a devastating personal decline. Pepper grew up in New York City, in a fractured home where affection was scarce, driving her to hide insecurity behind bravado. She broke into show business as a Goldwyn girl alongside Lucille Ball, dazzling on screen but privately enduring gossip about her reckless partying and wild temperament. When her husband, actor Craig Reynolds, was killed in a motorcycle accident in 1949, Pepper unraveled into depression and alcoholism that would haunt her for the rest of her career. She was poised to play Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, but was deemed too unreliable due to her drinking, a crushing humiliation that branded her in the industry. Producers whispered about her lateness, her unsteady speech, and violent drunken outbursts. Colleagues privately admitted they avoided working with her, though some were captivated by her unpredictable magnetism. Lawsuits over unpaid debts surfaced, and rumors of turbulent affairs painted her as a volatile figure whose personal demons eclipsed her charm. Her relationships were unstable, marked by betrayals and loneliness, with friends distancing themselves after repeated emotional explosions. By the late 1960s, her health collapsed, forcing her to abandon Green Acres in 1968, her once promising career now in shambles. She died on July 18, 1969, at just 54, from coronary thrombosis in Panorama City, California, her body ravaged by years of alcohol abuse. Her estate was meager, less than $100,000, a stark fall from her glamorous start. In death, she became a tragic emblem of squandered potential, remembered fondly by fans but whispered about in Hollywood as a cautionary tale of beauty undone by grief and addiction. Thank you for joining us on this nostalgic journey through classic television history. If you enjoyed learning about the cast of Green Acres and where they are now, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more vintage Hollywood retrospectives, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your memories and suggestions, so let us know which TV show or movie cast you'd like us to feature next.